I had this new idea, which was what if we operationalize transparency with our clients and with our employees? So why don't we make this not just some really nice people that treat people well, as a 50-person company, but why don't we create processes within our business and operate with total transparency across our client and our employee base? Because if that creates trust and strong relationships, then once again, aren't we going to recruit and retain the best employees? Aren't we going to attract the best clients, and they're going to stick around?
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun at all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today's episode is brought to you by Exec HQ, a C-suite fractional firm providing elite executives for your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Michael Sommers. Michael is the Managing Director of Delivery and General Management at Bell Leader Management Group. Prior to that, he held several leadership positions in management for several consulting and human capital companies, including 11 years as the founder and chief commercial officer of Balance Point, an award-winning company of over 500 employees serving Fortune 1000 organizations and technology-centric companies, providing talent, leadership, and strategy solutions. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Michael.
Michael, welcome to the Corporate Couch today.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great. You and I met via the famous Sean Carana, who I can't get on the podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it won't come on. But Sean, yeah, it was great to introduce us. And then you and I, one of the few meetings I have where we scheduled for an hour, and we're like an hour and 45, 50 minutes later, we're still talking. So it was great to meet you. Excited to talk to you. You have a great career. You've done crazy good things. Love that you're a leadership junkie. But let's start with a fun question. Even people that know you fairly well, what one thing would surprise them about you?
I decided to start learning the guitar 6 months ago.
Nice.
That's not something that people do at 55 years old, I think, but I'm having fun with it, and it's driving my wife nuts.
Is your goal to play in a band or just play some kind of AC/DC Thunderstruck or,
Yeah.
Metallica?
So actually, I have a bit of a musical background. My mom did a good job of instilling a variety of things in our lives. So we were all quite diverse growing up. Used to show horses and rodeo, and then plenty of us. There are 4 of us, and 3 of us got pretty involved in music. Mom enjoyed music, and she's a bit creative, and so I played trumpet. But then I also played drums in a professional country western band.
Wow.
I did some song and dance competitions in school, but I was also athletic and played basketball. So she just made us kind of willing to try whatever. And so I've got the music there, but then, did nothing with it, after, high school. So I've always been fascinated by the guitar, in particular the acoustic guitar. And it sounds nice to sit around with my wife and just pluck on it while we're watching TV or chit-chatting. And I've got this in my
out by the
head.
fire pit.
Yes. And because it's been so long since I've done it, and I'm left-handed, a buddy of mine gave me a right-handed guitar. And I thought, that concept of neuroplasticity, right? Our brains really do have the ability to rewire the neural pathways, but it gets harder and harder as you get older. What I want to do is be able to continue to learn and think differently than I have in the past. So I take this right-handed guitar. I am dominantly left-handed, and I'm learning the right-handed guitar, and I'm learning an instrument that I've never tried before. And so I'm just going through YouTube videos, and I picked one song that I'm using to practice eye-hand coordination and the opposite eye-hand coordination. So I'm having fun with that. But I was just telling my wife the other day, to answer your question, I think plenty of us, we like the idea of being able to add positivity into people's lives and say the right thing, do the right thing. You know, if you have a talent that can move people emotionally, that's wonderful. And so I haven't done that forever, but I thought, you know, how wonderful would it be if at some point I'm at a place where I can sit off in a corner with my guitar and a microphone and just be background noise in a, you know, some type of a social setting, whether it's a bar, grill,
Yeah.
or whatever. That really would be something that I could possibly see myself aspiring to do.
Nice.
But that's not my goal. My goal is to be able to play a variety of songs. And I was thinking about even taking vocal lessons again. So, you know, maybe I can just kind of have that campfire experience, but have an audience of one, you know, my poor wife.
Your poor wife. I want to say you're in great company. So the ex-mayor of Kansas City, Sly James, I had him on the podcast. What a great leader. He's, I'm going to say early 70s, and he's taking bass guitar lessons. So he,
Oh, is it really?
yeah. So, you know, and I know he's a lifelong learner, and I know you are. So there you go. So you're in good company.
I'm gonna have to fire up a band. I'll let him know
Yeah.
I'll be ready in about 7 years. Maybe.
And the fact about him was in high school and a little after high school, he was the lead singer of a rock band, and they opened for Jefferson Airplane back in the
Yes.
60s, early 70s. So
Really?
there you go. Yeah.
Oh, wow. And I love that era. I love that music.
So you talked about growing up on a dairy farm in Hoyt,
Yeah.
Kansas before we got
Yeah.
on the air. And you talked about, you know, you played a couple different instruments, basketball. What else was fun for you growing up as a kid?
I played football for quite a while, but you know, basketball was the one thing I stuck with. And then, you know, in my adult life, I continued to play in leagues all over town until I was in my early 30s. So I really had fun with basketball. I would say the other thing was just, you know, barrel racing and pole bending. Like we really enjoyed being cowboys. That was a
Yeah.
big deal.
So you go to college, Central Missouri State in Warrensburg. I know you graduated with business administration, Bachelor of Science in management. Was that your original major? Because most people have had multiple majors in college.
So actually, I didn't graduate. The way that came about is my parents divorced when I was young. It was a large part of setting the direction of my life because mom and stepdad had the farm. So that was our life, was farming. And we were very poor farmers. We didn't know we were poor. It's just, you know, that was a way of life for us. But the reason that's relevant is my dad was in the big city of Topeka and then eventually in Kansas City, building a business with his twin brother and with the investor and founder of this company. So by contrast, I'm on a dirty farm riding horses, but every other week, like clockwork, Dad made the drive. Once he moved to Topeka, it's an hour and 45-minute drive to pick us kids up on Friday night and show us a great weekend and take us home on a Sunday night. So that made Dad our absolute hero. The contrast between Dad's life, where he wore a suit and tie and he talked about enjoying being around people at work, yet farming is oftentimes in isolation on a tractor or you're with animals.
Sure.
And so our hero was Dad, and his life looked fantastic. When he picked us up, he tended to have the money to take us out for movies and restaurants, restaurants being fast food. That
Yeah.
wasn't in the cards for us.
Did you have a McDonald's in Hoyt, Kansas? What was the nearest McDonald's?
No. No, we didn't even have a gas station, and you know, we had a Butler building that served as the grocery store. So if we went to town, we went to Hoyt.
Right.
If we went to the city, we went to Topeka. And then if we went to what in our minds was like a major metropolitan, cosmopolitan city like New York, that was driving to Kansas City.
Right.
Went to Kansas City, it was mind blowing for us.
Right.
So Dad's our hero. He shows us a great time every other weekend. The other thing that just made him an awesome dad is he made the drive in the evenings to go to our events. So he rarely
Wow.
missed a game, a
Wow.
function, and he would just drive, sit in the stands, have a quick, hello and 5-10 minute chat, say all kinds of nice things, and back in his car and back to Kansas City.
Wow.
He did a wonderful job of making us feel special.
Wow.
And so I knew at an early age that I just was going to grow up to be just like my dad. I mean, that's all there was to it. So halfway through high school, I moved from Hoyt to Kansas City to live with Dad. And that was a really big turning point in my life because we had a blast for about 6 months. And he wasn't married. He was dating somebody he eventually married about a year later and became my stepmom. But it's kind of like I was hanging out with my best friend, with my dad. And he did a good job of kind of creating a honeymoon period of fun. But then, I'm a high school kid, so he's got to start parenting me. That's when I had my world turned upside down. So my dad, for the first time, demonstrated his parenting style. I also then was working at his company fixing washers and dryers. It's a large, very large laundry service company that deploys washers and dryers into apartment complexes and dormitories. So I'm working at the shop and I'm now being parented by my dad, and I see his style of management and leadership and parenting. And he was the epitome of a perfect command and control business owner and manager, as well as command and control parent. And that's not who I thought I was moving in with. It really caused me to rethink a lot of things. Like, do I go home and live with mom? I don't really feel like that's a great option. I've got to figure out who this other person is and adapt. But the other thing that was huge about this is I saw the way Dad treated who I thought would have been peers, right? Grown people, grown men and women at work. And again, he was very commanding. And it was a problem for me to see him treat people like children at work. I kind of understood treating me that way at home, but he treated his employees like this. In my opinion, it was kind of tyrannical. I mean, it was over the top. Fortunately, I'm the boss's kid, and they still embraced me as kind of like a kid brother. Instead of treating me like the boss's kid, they embraced me as one of them, and we all got treated like children.
Right.
So I built a lot of these wonderful relationships with these grown men where I'm going out in the field all day installing washers and dryers and repairing. And so my dad's back at the office, and we're all kind of in this special club of like working in a fear-based environment under a kind of a tyrant.
Interesting. Yeah.
I'm trying to make sense of it all, but the one foreman, Ronnie Sonker, who my dad respected and trusted the most, and everybody did, he still from time to time would make a mistake that would get the public abuse. But I really thought he rarely got it, and he, was in a more senior role. And we're making a long drive to install equipment. It's just he and I in the front of this big truck full of equipment. And again, I just admired this guy. He had a couple of daughters and a wife, and really had it going on. Real big guy with beard and had grease all over him all the time. And I just thought it was amazing. And he makes a comment about, I don't know why your dad has to treat people like that. I said, well, gosh, as you know, I get it too. I get it at home, I get it here. And then he says, with his voice cracking, he said, I just don't think your dad understands that it hurts. And I look over and this giant man is sobbing as he's driving this truck.
Wow.
And this is the same guy that made me feel really special and accepted by the team. And I just thought, that's not okay. It's just not okay.
Right.
Know that was the moment that hurt my heart so much that I vowed that I was going to go into business like my dad, but I was going to demonstrate that there is a completely opposite approach to leadership and management that makes people feel great about their jobs, great about themselves, great about each other, and that they probably would go home and be much better in the other roles of their lives, like a spouse or a father or a brother or whatever. And so that's been a very large part of my focus was go to college and study marketing, business administration, anything that would get me a foot in the door into a company, probably in sales, because that's how my dad started off, was selling and managing.
Sure.
And I would find my path into leadership where I was going to demonstrate a different way to treat people. and prove that you can grow a thriving business. Because my dad's business was thriving, but and I love my dad, and we're all super close. And it's heartbreaking that he's been married 4 times, right? So he's a hard man. He's lived a hard life. Yet he and his twin brother and the founder and investor, they built what is now the third largest company of its kind in the country. So it's a very large, successful company, but somewhere in Dad's life, he had to pay the price, and he's paid the price personally by not being able to, maintain solid personal relationships because of his style. And I wanted to demonstrate you can also build a very successful business, the opposite, which is to inspire people, to encourage them, to believe in them. I even personally believe that what I learned along the way is you can develop even a more successful business without having to pay the price anywhere in your life if you're a servant leader and you're there for them, they're not there for you.
Mike, where do you think you learned that? Because even before that conversation with that gentleman that broke down driving the truck, you knew it was wrong, the leadership style he had. So was there other mentors, other role models, or just you have just an innate sense like this is not right? Like, what was it for you?
Yeah, mom was very encouraging, uplifting, a lot of praise, plenty of correction, but you felt special and big. She'd go to all the events. When I played in the country western band, played drums, I just knew mom was beaming with pride that we were her children. I felt that way about dad until dad felt like it was time for him to shape and mold and correct. And then what I realized is, Jeff, I felt small in his presence.
Yeah.
I felt afraid. Like I didn't know what the right move was that was going to match his expectations. It was very hard to predict what was going to please dad. Because it was just me and dad, and I wasn't going to move home, I was going to figure out how to make this work. I was so tuned in to trying to anticipate what he was going to expect next, or anticipate anything else that was going on that might affect the way he responded to an honest mistake, right? Like I stripped a bolt when repairing a transmission. Is that going to, have him come down on me and make me feel very small and ashamed? Or was he going to be understanding because, it was a really old transmission that had a lot of rust? I just didn't know.
Right.
I was on super high alert. And what I realized by contrast is I'm on high alert and I'm playing small, where when I was with mom and she had us doing a variety of things, I was willing to play big, take risks, try anything, fail and be okay with that and try again. And it just started to become very clear to me that I'll bet you I would be even a more valuable employee. I think I could probably cover more ground and do more things and solve more problems if I wasn't in this mindset. But really, there was no room for that. That's not how dad wanted people to operate. He designed a business that left very few variables for people to operate independent.
Right.
He wanted people to operate as if they were inanimate objects who fit perfectly into a slot. And then anything that deviated, was inefficient to him. So he had to make sure that all the employees operated as much as robotic machines as possible. And I just realized that's not a state of being that was going to allow me to do my best, to make my best contribution. As I got older, I was less of the kid brother and a little bit more of a peer to these grown men who were fixing machines and collecting coins, because it's vending, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I also then started to be exposed to their little secrets. So they played a cat and mouse game at all times with my dad. My dad believed he had all the controls in place to leave no room for the variability, but he also didn't want people to have the freedom to take advantage of them. So a lot of monitoring, a lot of checks, a lot of controls. Well, they just would find other ways to, steal time and steal money. So when they're out in the field, they learn to cover for each other and kind of fabricate scenarios where they were dealing with a difficult repair. A difficult repair meant longer service calls. You stack up a few, the illusion of difficult repairs and service calls, and you all can meet up and go to a movie and dad would never know.
Right.
So I knew that they were playing games with long lunches and trying to steal time, because that's their way of kind of getting back at the jerk boss.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I'd learned is they were aware that some of the guys that collected money figured out how to skim. Well, back then they had manual counters. And what everybody figured out is if a machine can hold up to 400 quarters, you had two other things happen. And that is when the bin got full, some of the quarters could bounce out and actually drop further down in the machine where they're not easily retrievable. So there was a certain amount of quarters that a machine's counter would identify be off, some small amount. So whenever you collected and reported the counter number, Dad's internal counting and accounting would allow for some of that loss. Well, those guys knew that nobody would know what the conditions of the machine would be. So if they took 4 quarters per machine and collected 150 machines in a day, the system allowed for that much loss and they were putting it right in their pocket.
Right.
But Dad never believed that to be true. Dad believed he had a system that made people afraid. He also hired somebody to essentially be an auditor who would travel in the field and go out ahead of collectors and do a count, and then made sure that the collectors were aware that there was a security service that was doing audits and trying to catch them doing things wrong.
Interesting.
Once again, the cost of a low trust environment that created a cat and mouse game that the employees were happy to engage in.
Right.
And what my dad couldn't realize is there was a cost to the business. He could have grown faster, more successfully. He could have worked fewer hours, and maybe he wouldn't have been married 4 times if he actually believed in people and empowered people, trained them, developed them, but he didn't. He treated them as if they were necessary but untrustworthy.
Michael, talk about your early career after you left your dad's company. You sold a high growth company when you were 28. Talk about that period.
Yeah, so I got out of school. I went 4 years. I needed another year. Dad was paying half. I was paying half. He was not going to pay his half of year 5. And so I just thought, I've had enough schooling that somebody's going to give me an entry level sales job. So I'm going to go try that. And sure enough, I get a job pretty quickly. And again, I'm determined to get into leadership soon. But I knew first I had to prove that I could succeed, in my first role. And I get recruited very quickly into the IT field. I get recruited because I'm a left-handed, right-brained kind of lover of people. And in the IT space, in IT consulting, it's a bunch of engineers, right? So somebody there needs to be able to do the recruitment, do the sales, do all the communication, the interpersonal aspects. And this buddy of mine said that his dad had a firm and that his dad would probably, be happy to bring me in and train me up in the business, but I had the potential. And it happened to be at the same time that I was recruited in. I met my wife and our kids. So our 2 children are 37 and 33, and they are from Jane's previous marriage. Then I'm in my early 20s, having a good time with my friends. I meet this amazing woman, and pretty quickly, within a month or 2, I meet kids. And that's at the same time I'm getting recruited into this, IT consulting business. And I just thought that I hit the lottery. I had this amazing family, this career, this upside in this tech field that I didn't know anything about. And I was just so grateful. Sure enough, we get married, but pretty early on, I thought it'd be amazing to be, a family. And it was from that gratitude, I believe, of just feeling like my life was set in motion in a beautiful way, that I feel like it helped me be really effective at my job. I was full of enthusiasm. I was back to, a fearlessness, right? I wasn't playing small like I worked under my dad or in his company, but I felt like more of the person that Mom helped me become. And it happened to be that this was in the 90s and there was a lot of Y2K remediation going on. So, the budgets were growing. It's kind of a rising tide lifts all ships scenario. The company I was with was growing like crazy. I felt like I was making a massive contribution. I was in love with my family. I was in love, soon, we got married within a couple of years, but I was in love with engineers. And that was the other thing that I think really helped ignite in me my passion, is that engineers really embraced me. I found them to be brilliant and fascinating, and they were happy to have me representing them in the marketplace and professing their capabilities to to join companies and do, code remediation.
Yeah, they just wanted to write code in the closet drinking Mountain Dews, right?
Well, what they also wanted was they wanted to environments that they would enjoy and feel appreciated. So rather than just be a team of, nerds who were put off in the corner, they wanted to work under great leadership and, good cultures. And so I wanted to go find the clients that would treat them well.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Exec HQ, a C-suite fractional firm providing elite executives for your business. If you're having challenges taking your business to the next level, if you want to augment your leadership team, or prepare your company for increased growth, profitability, and an eventual successful exit, we have seasoned executives from every C-suite position ensuring a perfect fit for your needs and the dynamics of your industry. You will work with senior leaders who like to roll up their sleeves while checking their egos at the door. They can help your business in specific services such as strategic planning, executive leadership coaching, financial management, corporate governance, marketing, sales management, and many other advisory solutions vital to your business success. That's exechq.com. To learn more, go to exechq.com or email Jeff Palacio at jeff.palacio@exechq.com.
So we had a lot of success, and it was the company that I was with that had promoted me pretty fast because I was very effective. And I will tell you that once they promoted me into leadership, I did learn that I had the ability to apply some of my dad's traits. I didn't realize that early in my career, once I had a team of 12 people, I loved the heck out of them, and my presence was different than my dad's. But I also started trying to create the structure that locked everything down and kind of eliminated the unique characteristics that people brought to the table to be able to express how they did their work. I went through the experience of having a great leader who helped me rethink that approach, believed in me, and had invested in another company, and it needed my enthusiasm. He had asked if I was willing to go to this other startup and help get it off the ground. The founder of the startup was somebody that was working at the company that I was with before that, and I knew he was an amazing leader. He was only a couple of years older than me, but everybody loved being around this guy. Lots of humility, fairly soft-spoken, was very much a servant leader who wanted to just attract people that would feel a sense of ownership around the firm. So when they asked if I would go to the startup and take a big risk, take a massive pay cut, at this time, Jane and I had just gotten married. I didn't even hesitate. Back to that courage that Mom put in us. And Jane supported me. And so we went over there, and Scott was the most natural born leader I'd ever encountered. And so I was on fire. We immediately started attracting people who were on fire. And the more we attracted people like that, the smaller Scott got. He didn't want all the control. He didn't want all the praise. He's just that quiet, humble leader off in the corner trying to figure out how to help us all be great. And this is a guy who's the president of the company with the majority of the equity. We did the opposite of what I saw my dad do, which is we were all there for each other. We were there for him. We were there for our clients. That company grew at such a rapid rate that it became an acquisition target. And we ended up selling that when I was 28 years old for millions. And people wanted it because of its ability to grow at that rate, but it also was a solid business that generated very strong earnings. We weren't that interested in selling, but it happened to be the president, my boss, who also we all just considered a dear friend, because that's how we were running the company. At this point, we're at about 50 employees, and his health took a turn. His family has a condition called Alport's. He goes from being perfectly healthy to he's got long hospital stays, lost tons of weight. He was on dialysis, and it was kind of touch and go a few times. So that was another reason for us to think about taking offers to sell the company, which we did. So we sold it. I stayed on with a 5-year contract and a non-compete with this big publicly traded company. He left and went to get better. He ended up getting a kidney transplant and regained his health, got hearing aids, ended up doing very, very well until that kidney failed, which was just a few years ago. And he went for another transplant and his body just couldn't take it. And he passed away a few years ago. But anybody who was around him just fell in love with him, and they knew that he cared deeply about everybody succeeding. He just had a vibe about him that was special.
You're in your low to mid 20s. They say brains don't fully evolve until people are 25. I mean, your self-awareness and maturity, just you meet this wonderful woman, Jane, who becomes your wife, but she's, older than you with children. And you're like, a lot of guys would be like, oh yeah, I don't want to do this, but you knew what you wanted, both from a job perspective and your life.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the choice that I made to move in with my dad. So I'm so grateful that I had this amazing upbringing with my mom, but my sophomore year, I wanted to go live with my dad. I wanted to stop farming. I wanted to play more sports. I wanted to be selfish. And I chose not to go back home. I chose to try to figure this out. It put my brain to work to try to understand such a drastic change of my environment, of what I saw as values, because I did not see those values in my dad when he wasn't punishing us as a parent. He never came down on us in the weekend visits. All he wanted to do, because he had so little time, was just show us joy and happiness and love.
Yeah.
So it was such a jolt to my system that it was a problem to be solved. But the problem was not to rebel. It was, how do I figure out how to make him happy? How do I figure out how to anticipate? What is my response to that? How is that changing me? Is this the me that I want to be? It's not the level of fulfillment that I used to experience. Well, then if I'm going to learn to navigate this environment, what is it teaching me for the person I want to become when I become an adult? And so I think all of it was, I'm excited to professionally become the leader that is going to inspire and liberate what I know is the person that I was when I moved in with my dad. Because the person that I'm required to be with my dad is not the person that can do the best things in life. Mm-hmm. I wanted to make a greater contribution. I wanted to be a great employee. At that point, I wanted to learn how to be a great leader. I wanted to be a great friend. So I know that what happened is, as I was preparing to become independent, I also probably pulled into that the kind of parent I wanted to be, right? I was not going to be the parent that created fear in the home. That was my focus. So when I meet Jane and the kids, I'm thinking I instantaneously get to become a dad and become an employee and soon become a leader, where I can kind of almost test this hypothesis. And that is, there is just a presence. Ended up being proved out by Scott Palmer, right? Scott Palmer epitomized what I thought was what I wanted to end up experimenting with when I became an adult, which is, it's the way mom created an environment that helped us live out our purpose, not the one that dad created. I'm also very grateful that I never resented my dad. I remember he loved me, and this is what he thinks he has to do because he thinks it's what's in my best interest, just like he thought that for his employees, he had to do the thinking for them. It was in their best interest.
Right.
They weren't owners. They weren't general managers. If they do it his way, they'll have a good day. It was well intended, but it destroys the agency. It destroys the humans.
Right. Yeah.
But he didn't know that. That wasn't his intent.
Yeah.
He wanted them to have a very good day following the rules. But what's also interesting is I'd mentioned that I found that I had adopted some of those traits and had them available to me when I became a manager, because then I started to put people into these very restrictive operating models. Mm-hmm. When it was time to create environments that I thought people were going to thrive in. It's just really interesting the way I wasn't full blown like my father, but I started thinking that applying some of these philosophies just seemed to make sense.
Right.
Fortunately, by the grace of God, I was given a Scott Palmer to demonstrate it, but he looked like a peer of mine. So it made it very obvious by contrast where I was starting to deviate and move into a model that I did not want to be a part of. Right. So I had a lot of work to do. At 30 years old is when I started to really put in the work, read the books, went to a ton of counseling, have today and had then a very strong wife who was willing to hold me accountable to working through the transformation that I needed to go through.
You start one of the most successful companies in Kansas City, and definitely in the IT consulting space in 2005. You know, you were one of the best places to work for, best IT consulting company, four-time Inc. High growth company. Talk about that journey and how you started it and the success you had there.
One of the ideas that Scott Palmer and I had was how to treat people and to get them excited and make sure they know their value and we care for them. And we also treated our clients that way. And one of the things we started doing for our clients was being very transparent with them. So they felt like they were a part of our company because we're in the human capital business, right? So it's really it's relationships. Do we want to work together on these projects and do we want to trust each other? And are we going to enjoy that? And so we realized that there's something really special about being transparent and being vulnerable with your clients and not trying to win a client by acting like we're better than other people. What we were doing was talking about our track record of attracting great talent and keeping great talent, which really was what made us better than our competitors in our opinion. But it's just because we love our people. When we took that to market, that was appealing in a different way. It wasn't that, we had the best pricing. We just felt like we had really heartfelt, committed, talented people, and we were grateful they were on the team. We treated our clients differently, in which case that was now embedded in me to operate like that. When I was with the company that acquired us, I had this new idea, which was, what if we operationalized transparency with our clients and with our employees? Because what I've realized is, people are attracted to that. They stay with companies like that as employees as well as clients. So why don't we make this not just some really nice people that treat people well, as a 50-person company, but why don't we create processes within our business and operate with total transparency across our client and our employee base? Because if that creates trust and strong relationships, then once again, aren't we going to recruit and retain the best employees? Aren't we going to attract the best clients and they're going to stick around? So I proposed this to the CEO of this large billion-dollar company, and they found it to be really intriguing. But at the end of the day, their concern was, we've got a lot of revenue flowing, and if we have an open book model, we're going to offer up a lot of information to employees and clients that gives them the upper hand to try to negotiate pricing, either negotiate pay raises as an employee or negotiate new rates. And I said, but aren't we operating on fair market pricing already? Our margins are not out of whack. We pay people well. We charge standard bill rates. Then what do we have to hide? And they said, well, we don't have anything to hide, but we just don't know whether or not we would be taken advantage of. And I just found that to be so interesting that I worked with a bunch of really good people, and we would all go out and wine and dine our clients and act like we're all best friends and talk Royals and Chiefs and give them tickets. But at the end of the day, behind closed doors, you're telling me you can't totally trust our clients. I knew what I was going to do was finish my contract, and I was going to go start another firm. And it was going to look an awful lot like what Scott and I created the first time, except we were going to formalize processes in the firm to make sure that everybody was indoctrinated into this mindset of we're going to operate a high trust firm where, of course, we're going to care about each other and love each other. And that's just human stuff because we're in the human capital space. But we can scale through the processes of building trust through transparency and vulnerability. As my contract came to an end, my friend introduced me to a guy named Scott Lippert, who had taken funding from his father to start a firm where he was attracting talent in the scientific space and the tech space. And they wanted to figure out how to build a great consulting firm. They were running into the standard challenges, and that is, how do we differentiate in the market? And they were introduced to me. I brought this idea of, well, a way to differentiate is to build out a company entirely around this idea called the market-driven transparency model. And I quickly just painted this picture. But because Scott Palmer and I had our previous successful build and exit, it added enough credibility that Scott and Jackie trusted me that this is a model that could help us differentiate and grow a very successful business. and that we would be a very profitable business, because when you trust people, they tend to only want the company to succeed and not actually try to take advantage of it and weaken it, right? Our clients didn't want to weaken the firm and drive our rates down. Our employees didn't want to weaken the firm and take advantage of negotiating excessive pay raises. So once I joined them, we reinvented the company practically overnight, named it Balance Point, built out the fundamental processes upon which we could build the rest of the firm. That was the market-driven transparency model. It was almost like an overnight success. Once we just started to spread the word, people started telling their peers, and executives wanted to give it a try. And their thing was they wanted high trust partnerships. They loved the way we treated our employees, because if you think about a CIO or CTO, they're just engineers that are 15 years down the road. So they love the way we treated engineers and the way we valued people. And the big question mark is, okay, this is a partnership model that I can count on in perpetuity, which is huge, because as we get to know each other, we should become a more effective partnership where you're more effective in knowing how to assemble teams and deploy the people that match what we're trying to do with our tools and with our approaches and with our culture. But if you guys don't know how to be good matchmakers and identify the right talent, the purity of the model doesn't help if you don't know how to deploy the right teams. All we had to do is prove out that it's a high trust model that offers the transparency that allows us to gather the information from our clients, because they let us deep into their organizations.
Right.
And letting us in that deep, we were equipped with the information necessary to be great matchmakers.
So you have a great run there, winning all these awards, you're a successful company. So after 11 years, what was kind of the, I need to do something else moment?
It was probably about 3 to 4 years before I sold out that we developed a new practice. We're deploying talented technology teams and they're getting work done and everybody's happy, but we found that there was a new opportunity that our clients started clamoring for, and we decided to respond to it. And that is, wow, you guys are an amazing partner. We love the way you love your people and you love us. And this is, you're in the human capital space and you're doing it right. Could you help us with building out a culture that's a lot like yours, right? It feels great to be around inspired people and teams and high trust environments. And the first 3 times we got asked that question, can you come in and train our leaders as to how to build these type of inspiring high trust cultures so we can also attract and retain talent and have a great high performing experience? The first 3 times the answer was, well, we're not in the training business. We'd be happy to share with you what we've done. I'll introduce you to our Franklin Covey partner who we hired to help us build our leadership operating model that has taught us how to treat people. And what we found is I would make the intro and they wouldn't follow through and get a hold of my Franklin Covey partner. Well, the 4th time that we were asked, what I realized is the reason they're not following through is they don't want a cookie cutter approach to leadership. And because they knew that we cared for them, they trusted us to be able to deliver and implement these leadership philosophies, not some hired gun stranger who doesn't understand technology people. Like that was their sentiment. So I gave Franklin Covey a call and I said, look, I really want to help our clients. I love what you've done for us. I believe they'll move forward with Franklin Covey if they believe that it was Balance Point doing the delivery. Would you allow us to do the delivery through our MSA? And we will, of course, compensate you. They'll pay you for the licensing and the IP. And Larry Reynolds, the local rep, said, I see no reason why not. You're basically adding a new client to my portfolio. We'd be happy to do that and we'll support you. So I felt like it was a God thing that we kept being asked and that it's time not to say no. Apparently this is the evolution of the firm. So we started delivering leadership development curriculum to our clients. The more we did it, the more we realized that they were elevating their game, but they also took it as a bit of a love language from Balance Point that we cared that much to figure out how to help them be great leaders, which just reinforced the relationship. It deepened the relationship. We got to know each other even better and made us even better at deploying teams and being a matchmaker and doing recruiting for them. And so we then decided to formalize that practice, but not as a major revenue arm, but as a major differentiator and value add to our clients. That then turned into doing executive coaching work for them. So yes, develop leadership across our entire team or our enterprise, but could you also help me as a C-level executive with a little bit of executive coaching? Because you guys are working with so many different companies. Clearly, you have an idea of what C-level executives are doing. So, I'd love to take your advice. So now we're doing executive level coaching, leadership development, and then we're being asked to do executive search work. Well, gosh, you guys clearly have a very refined lens as to what a great leader looks like. Tons of people in town, and you're a great matchmaker. Would you help us hire an SVP of software engineering? Would you help us hire a CFO? And we just kept saying yes to the honor that they were giving us by asking us to do the what I consider to be strategic work for our clients. And I got an appetite, very strong appetite to want to then be more forward about that. And instead of just waiting for them to ask, we started including that in the total offering of how we wanted to help our clients. And the more we did it, the more it strengthened the brand of Balance Point. And it happened to be that one of the two partners felt like it was also watering down the higher revenue part of our business. And the more I got passionate about it, and the more that my partners started to think that it was taking up too much of my time and my passion, and maybe was a bit of a distraction, made it very obvious that we wanted to go different directions with how we served our clients. So I sold my shares back to them, and I just continued to invest in my ability to help executives create great cultures and great environments that liberated people and inspired people to do their best work.
You were in the, I think, in the .com era. I played in that space, and it was very interesting. But what I've noticed about you, Michael, in our conversation today, as well as your LinkedIn profile, and you use the word love a lot, and I mean, that just it separates you. And I still remember there was a book right during the .com era, and I'm going to forget the guy's last name, but the book was called "Love is the Killer App." So all these apps are being developed, and not really the phone apps at that time, but apps from a software development perspective.
Yeah.
And he was like the chief product officer of Yahoo. It was Tim something, but that's what he was talking about. It's not about the technology; it's how you treat people. So that's what I really admire, because you talk about your different companies. I think at Covenant Consulting, you called on to love, honor, and serve, and in your about section in LinkedIn, you love revolutionizing, the pursuit of greatness in companies and individuals, right? And so I think it says a lot about you. Where'd you get that kind of mentality?
Yeah, it goes back to my mom doing such a great job of helping us kids just want to play big and try things and engage, and not just sit on the sidelines afraid of failing at something. Or even when it comes to relationships, mom never talked about these things, but I realized that if I wanted Jane to marry me, the last thing I need to do is sit back and play it cool. That vulnerability is hard for a lot of people. It's hard for me. In my career, I have had to continue to remind myself that there are times where I'm not picking up on the signs as to whether or not XYZ company thinks they need what our company has to offer, right? I think a lot of us play it safe because rejection is hard. And the last thing you want to do is look like you're desperate and risk validating that you're not wanted. It might be easier just to sit back and go, well, I think I've heard enough, I've seen enough, I'm not really sure they need what we do. In my opinion, that's a little bit self-defeating. If I pursue a client, if I pursue an employee, if I pursue human relationships to explore what's possible, it will come with rejection. There will be people that it's just the wrong time. They're going through something in their lives where they're like, look, dude, I don't need what you're selling, and I don't need to meet with you. That's okay. I'm just enthusiastically trying to figure out how I can add value to people's lives. And if somebody is not in a receptive mindset, they can be very direct, and I'll respect that. I'm going to take it upon myself to explore that without waiting for them to give me buying signals. My job is to communicate the value that I think we have created in our company and that I've created in myself as a delivery person. Somebody might not be ready at that time. They may never be ready. I don't know. But I'm going to make sure that I make myself available to everybody. Because if I'm super cautious about that, there might be something that needs what I have to offer right now. But because I'm playing it safe, I didn't play my part in communicating that to them because I'm not seeing the obvious buying signs. I'll take the rejection to get out there and help as many people as I possibly can. And then I started wiring myself with this idea. It's kind of a numbers game, which is if I play small, play safe, play it cool, try to get people to think that, they need to chase me, I don't need to chase them. If I were to play that way, I think there would be a lot of the market that I would miss out on finding them at just the right time that I can make a big difference for them. For every person who I think is maybe they find it off-putting that I'm so tenacious about that. I think that if you play the numbers, out of 10 people, one of them is going to find it off-putting. 3 are going to be grateful that the solution found them and that I'm truly so heartfelt about making a difference for them in their professional lives. So there are 6 of them left. That was naturally going to happen anyway. And we're going to find each other and do business together. But I don't want to risk the 3 that desperately need the help. And all it took was me being vulnerable enough to be the one to approach them with tenacity to say, I think I can, be a great service provider. And I'd love to figure out if what you're going through, at this very moment might be, where we thrive in solving those problems. I think it goes back to the difference of mom helping us play big and dad giving me a reason to really examine the difference between that and playing small, and being willing to take the hits and take the knocks. And I've had people who have cared enough about me to call me out on that word love. And they're like, that makes people uncomfortable. And in the corporate world, it can be risky, right? There's supposedly an HR risk around it. I've tried to be grateful for that feedback and be open-minded and then really examine my motive, examine the risks. Sometimes it's examining whether or not it's appropriate for me to adjust because, if I've got business partners, this isn't just my company. So we should decide what kind of leadership we're going to instill in the organization. As I've gotten older, I've probably worked harder to find the people that resonate with this approach, this very authentic, vulnerable, caring approach. Because I think that when you care about people like that, I think you can change the world. If senior leaders realize that all the collective intelligence and thinking and passion and innovation that is available in the workforce is at their disposal, if they realize their job is to not do the thinking, their job is to not control, it is not to keep people in check. It is not, of course, to minimize. Your job is the servant leader. It's the inverted pyramid.
Right.
We don't need an MBA to care deeply about another human being and to see them. Patrick Lencioni is one of the best for a reason, and that is he simplifies all of it down to just basic human psychology and human behavior. And one of the great books he wrote that is not something most people have read, he once again does a great job in story form of simplifying it, called The 3 Signs of a Miserable Job, The Secrets to Employee Engagement. And he uses very simple settings to verify that this is human psychology and human behavior that applies to every human being that works in a major corporation, but we just overcomplicate it.
Right.
So he calls it the 3 signs of a miserable job: irrelevance, immeasurability, and anonymity. You're a faceless worker who I could trade out tomorrow. So you don't matter. I don't care about what you're trying to achieve in your life, what life looks like at home, and your passions and your none of that's all a bother to me. Do the job and you're lucky to have it if you do it well. Immeasurability is just, does anybody know by some objective measure how to know the amount of value that they contributed to the organization and to the customers today? Because they'd like to know that you help them do that, not as a punitive measure of accountability. And then the irrelevance is, do you really understand that there are other human beings who have a better experience because you serve them somehow, internally and externally?
Right.
So if you help people understand their relevance, you help them create the kind of measures that are their measures, not management's measures to hold them down, but their own measures to give them something to strive for. And then you care about them holistically as a human being. So all of these great thought leaders around what leadership greatness really is have been writing about this stuff forever. And what it boils down to, and fortunately, Simon Sinek started using this word, which gave me some license to use it a lot, and that is loving your people.
Mm-hmm.
And when Simon Sinek started, we've gone mainstream enough with that word to be synonymous with the safer word of caring and with servant leadership. Like, doggone it, this stuff has been around.
Yeah.
My mom taught me to play big. I am not going to trade that out for some kind of a word that plays to the 10% of the population that are concerned about HR violations.
Right.
I'm going to play to the 90% of the population that wants to go to work every day and have a meaningful experience with other human beings so they can create a livelihood for their families. The cool part is I've gotten to see these great executives treat people like that, use some of this language. I talk to executives about the simplicity of just truly caring and then expressing the caring and seeing the business model. You can do the math of what that can do for the value proposition, right? It's not that hard to figure out. Fortunately, the word engagement's become a big deal over the last decade. The research shows that there's 30 to 39% discretionary contribution completely available to a pretty content workforce, by the way. Would you like to have a content workforce of 100 people where with the simplicity of caring and loving on them can turn them into the amount of output and value of 130 to 139 people, right? And give them that type of a thrilling experience of being amazing at their jobs and being winners and making contributions and building incredible resumes. Like, that's how it's done.
Right.
So then I've gotten to see all this. And then it happened to be that 4 years ago, I was invited into Cloud Inventory. So there's a CEO that absolutely loves his people, fiercely competitive, and a brilliant executive, used to work at SAP, so he had big corporate experience. He was a steward of the resources of that company to be able to fulfill its potential, and he wants to see people play big and thrive. And he asks me to join, and we are in the midst of doing a massive turnaround in this company. He and I now talk about it when looking back on it, of how simple it was. And we've created a very straightforward model of what we did to create this turnaround. This company was losing $500,000 a month. He was halfway through a transformation for a 5-year window of time to get it transformed, increase its value, and get it sold. I joined him to do this turnaround. We rebuild the executive team, believe in these same concepts, ego, high servant-minded executives with a proven track record. And in 22 months, we turned the company around to $1 million a month EBITDA performance and generated roughly, you could estimate about $100 million of enterprise business value based on the 9-figure exit we created by turning around its business performance, really by engaging the entire workforce to feel valued and to be intellectually engaged in solving this puzzle. And that is, how do we grow this company and drive value for the customers? And once we got them engaged because they felt cared for, valued, loved, and literally the CEO talks about loving them, the entire workforce got engaged. The company's performance started to turn around just by the month. You could just watch it march, all the KPIs. We got the company exited for the owner. So it's like, not only have I seen it done and I've worked on a much smaller scale, but now I got to go serve a CEO that wanted to put these things into practice and just needed a team around him to help him do it. And we got tremendous business results.
Right.
I'm more convinced than ever that these are just universal concepts that anybody can apply if they've got the guts to do it.
Michael, I love to help two groups of people. So we're recording here January 12th, 2024. So there's a lot of young adults graduated from colleges and universities last month. What advice would you give them as they go out and get their first professional job and begin their career journey?
The best thing they could possibly do is not interview in the hopes of getting an offer, which sounds counterintuitive. They should read the books, polish up, and get ready to say everything the interviewer wants to hear so they can get that job. I will say that the generations entering the workforce now are probably less inclined to do that than any generation that has come before them, because they do have a greater sense of self and meaning and purpose. And I think they're probably looking for fit much better than my father's generation was. We're going to have people who are going to coach them on how to succeed in an interview. But I think if they go into the interview, to have the courage in that interview to say they're as interested in a good fit as the hiring manager probably is. And that isn't really talking about skills or accomplishments. You can talk about those things, but if you're coming out of college, it's entry level. I think it's talking about perspective, purpose, passion. Without a doubt, you want to look for synergistic work styles. What makes us different in all the right ways, that what I bring to the table and what I get excited to do and what I want to get better at doing is different than what the boss is great at. So I can be a great servant, right? If I'm going to serve, then what I really want to do is make sure that we're finding the place where you can best tap into, my creativity and my passion and my courage and my fearlessness, and that I want to bring that to a team where I'm contributing to all of us winning. If you go into an interview talking in those terms, you're not making it about you. You're making it about the table that can help the team thrive. And if you're really, really thoughtful and courageous about that, the right leader is going to make an offer. For the leaders that want you to perfectly fit into the team and pay your dues and have patience and be self-aware enough to know that you don't know anything. So we don't want you to bring your voice to the table. We just want you to come in and be molded. I would caution the job seeker that might not be a philosophy that is going to be the kind of servant leader that is there to help find that special potential in them and help unleash that full potential to the betterment of the team and the organization.
Yeah, I love that advice. I think, the authenticity, and what I tell, recent college graduates, be yourself. I mean, you don't try to game the system, because you're looking for the best fit. So if you can represent yourself and what you want and need and what you stand for, that you're going to get a better fit. The second group is, well, anyone can be a leader. You don't have to have a team underneath you. But once you do get that promotion and you're responsible for a team of people from an HR perspective, what leadership advice do you have for them, Michael, as they begin that leadership journey?
If you want to know what's important to somebody, you don't even need to get to know them. Just ask them for the last 12 months of their bank account and the last 12 months of their calendar, because where people put their time and where people put their money is a demonstration of what's most important and what's on their hearts. So people can say things all day long. Where is their attention? Where is their focus? Where are the things that matter? And time matters. I have added to that, because that's not original. Somebody else came up with that, but I think there's a third thing that I could examine about somebody for the last 12 months that would complete the picture of who they are and what matters to them. And that is 12 months of their internet search history, right? So if I got to see everything that you researched on the internet, everywhere that you put your money and everywhere you put your time, then I would know what matters to you. So my recommendation to somebody who wants to be a great leader is to examine where they put their valuable resources, their thoughts, their passion, their energy, what they're learning, where they're putting their time, who gets their time, and to be really, really thoughtful about what that communicates. No matter what you say, people you lead at the end of the day are going to sense how much they mean to you, not by your words, but by your actions. And a lot of people believe that you can come up with all the wording and the fancy buzzwords and all the things that managers use. And I will tell you that I have found some of the most successful executives and business owners and entrepreneurs that I've encountered in my entire career use the most basic language. They do not use buzzwords, and they do not try to impress with their vocabulary.
Michael, thank you so much. I'm going to throw that love word right back at you. I love your leadership style, and your accomplishments are phenomenal. And thank you for coming on the Corporate Couch today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, thanks. Have a great rest of the day. It's great talking to Michael. I so enjoyed his stories of his upbringing. Talk about leadership junkie. I think that is self-described. I mean, just his self-awareness in his 20s and his maturity on his relationship with his dad, which is another thing. I mean, the lessons he learned from both his mom and dad, and how he took that to make himself better in all aspects of his life, a leader, from a his professional life, but, as a dad and a friend. I mean, he just took it to various different levels, but I mean, like,
took these lessons from his dad, even though his dad wasn't a perfect role model.
yes. And yeah, but be self-aware. He could have been very resentful
Oh gosh, yeah.
of his dad and held his dad like in contempt or whatever, like,
And he didn't.
but no, he didn't. And they have a great relationship today. And then the lessons he learned from his mom too. He said it several times during our conversation. My mom taught me, kind of lead with love and play big. Think big, think outside of, just the little things, and think big and do big things. Like, he mentioned it several times. I love that he uses love in a lot of different ways,
Oh, yeah.
in terms of his LinkedIn bio, talking about the power of vulnerability and transparency and leadership. Yeah, and he was vulnerable during the interview. He talked about, at 30 years old, he did the hard things. He put in more of the work to be a better person, whether that was leadership or a dad or a spouse. Went to counseling, read. I mean, he's just incredible. I just really enjoyed talking to him.
And all that, the love that he was talking about, love for his workers and things, that the sincerity is just drips,
Yes.
There's just no doubt at all about how sincere he is, and he's not putting on a show, man. This is actually what he believes and how he leads his life. One of the things that he pointed out was he talked about what he's called the 3 sides of the miserable job. And I Googled that later and found out that came back both to Patrick Lencioni, which Michael referred to, but that's also a section of Seth Godin's book, his linchpin book. So I don't know who borrowed it from who, but the 3 sides of a miserable job is irrelevance, unmeasurability, and anonymity. And I can totally personally attest to that in the times of my career, especially towards the end of my professional career, when I was experiencing irrelevance, unmeasurability, and anonymity, that's when I felt my lowest. And that's when I felt that I got to do something else. I got to get out of here. I got to find something else going on. It was an amazing story. I kept waiting to see, well, so what's going to happen next? It just kept going on and on about the interesting stuff in his career. And I think there's still more left in his life. I think we can go back and interview him 15, 20 years from now, and it'll just continue on, and we'll find out more and more about the incredible life of Michael and the stuff that he's learned in going through this life. It was a great interview.
He talks about leading with love and vulnerability. Honestly, we don't use the video too much in these episodes, but he looks like an action hero, like somebody, like a
Yeah.
Liam Neeson, in Taken, like he literally had the haircut, the beard. I mean, and he's a big guy. So, and it's just funny, the duality of that. But I love it. So I'm sure based on Michael's episode, you have some great leadership wisdom.
We are going back to that great philosopher, Stephen Wright. Stephen Wright had some great advice one time where he said, eagles may soar, but weasels don't get sucked into jet engines.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.